Hello, creators. In this episode of the Comic Industry Commentary, we'll talk about contests that Webtoons are throwing, publishers that Diamond is losing, new comics in the ever growing actor to comic book creator circuit, and what an editor actually does for your comics. My name is Gamal Hennessy, and we'll jump right into the action with the contest that Webtoons is running for their next big action series. They've announced this, I guess, on MSNBC, the first of the month. The contest will run until the end of July. And the two main points about this contest are that if you win, the main prize is $50,000. Second, third, and fourth prizes are incrementally lower, but you will also get a Webtoons deal, which means that they will actually help you with the merchandising. They'll help you translate this book into print. They'll help you do a lot of other things that will get your book out to a wider audience. The thing that you need to look out for, because you always need to read the fine print with these things, is that you're going to have to turn around and sign a comprehensive deal in a very short amount of time. Now, for most people, they don't necessarily have access to an attorney who specializes in digital web comics and can be able to explain this whole contract to them. And in my experience, the faster someone wants you to sign a contract, the more there's probably something wrong with the contract. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't investigate this contest, maybe try for the $50,000 yourself, but keep that in the back of your head that there may be significant impacts to your IP and your ownership of your IP if you get involved with this contest. Now, in distribution news, it was reported earlier this week that Marvel has completed its pretty much its separation from Diamond and is going with Penguin Random House as their exclusive distributor, both in the direct market and in the bookstore market. Now, this is the next chapter in what has been a stunning turnaround for Diamond Comics distributors because pre pandemic, they were the undisputed one stop shop for comics if you wanted to get your book into the direct market. Now they've lost not only DC and Marvel, but a lot of the other independent and emerging publishers have gone to Simon and Schuster, or they've gone to Penguin Random House, or Lunar, or whatever that other one is. So it's going to be interesting to see what Diamond tries to do to compensate for the loss of two of their largest publishers. Will they actually start to tap into the growing Kickstarter market to be a distribution channel after a campaign? Will they reach out more and be more amenable to independent publishers than they have been in the past? Time will tell. But if you are in one of those situations, keep in mind that just because Diamond gets you into the catalog doesn't mean that the comic shop owners are going to order your comic. You have to take the next step and give them a reason to take a chance on your book so that you can actually not only get distributed, but actually get bought by the end user, which in this case is the comic book shop. In emerging and independent publisher news, this earlier this week, it was announced that David Duchovny of X Files and Californication fame is now launching his own graphic novel. And this comes on the heels of Oscar Isaac and Wesley Snipes and Keanu Reeves and Bruce Campbell all taking the cachet that they've gained in genre movies and translating that into comics. Now, I think, and this may be a cynical perception, but I believe this is a way that these actors and celebrities are actually using their fame to create their own comic book franchises, and that they'll use this in sort of a boomerang effect where they'll take their fame, make a comic, have the comic be fairly successful, and then use that comic to go back to Hollywood executives and say, yes, you should actually give me the money to make a movie or a TV series about my comic, because comics are still a hot commodity in Hollywood. And by the way, the lead in this story just happens to look exactly like me. So you should probably cast me as the lead. And by the way, give me a producer credit. And by the way, give me a writer's credit because it is a book that I quote unquote wrote. Now, whether how many of these pan out into successful films or how many of these translate into successful franchises remains to be seen, but it's not the worst idea in the world because developing a comic relative to how much it costs to actually develop a sizzle reel or any other kind of pitch materials for Hollywood, a comic book is relatively cheap. So if that their goal is to actually take advantage of the continued popularity of comics and leverage their own fame, this isn't a bad way to do it. The final story comes to us, I believe, from Comic Book Resources or comicbook.com, and they explain exactly what a comic book editor does. They talk to several writers, artists, and editors themselves to actually go into the process of how an editor helps to get a book out the door. Now, this article doesn't really go into the different types of editors, like copy editor, proofreader, developmental editor, project manager, or any of those other things. But it does actually stress how important editors are to comics. And I think especially when you're talking about emerging or independent comics, a lot of creators in that space feel like they may not necessarily need an editor to get the book out the door because they're not really sure how that extra cost is going to impact the quality of their book. I say that any book that you're going to do on any level, whether it's a webtoon, single issue, graphic novel, you need to have at least one editor of one type looking at your book because it can only raise the quality of the book and it could also reduce the cost of the book and make sure the book comes in on time if you get the right editor to oversee the entire project. So that's going to do it for this episode of Comics Industry Commentary. If you'd like to get a free consultation about any kind of legal issue involved with your comic, you'll be able to find a link to get a free consultation from me in the show notes. If you'd like to join the wider discussion about the business aspects of comic book industry, you can join the Comics Publishing Institute with another link that will also be in the show notes. And until then, have fun with your comics.